From the Planet Suite, Mars, the bringer of war. Not, I hope, the bringer of war in the context of the Manx Sky at night. Howard, there is something important that you want to say about Mars.
There's a few things actually going on Mars at the moment, and the last place you want to be at the moment is on Mars, because there's a huge, complete planet-wide dust storm taking place on the surface. This happens. Mars comes to what we call opposition, when it's exactly opposite the part of the sky from the sun. And it actually came to opposition on Friday night, the night of the lunar eclipse. But when it does this, it can also be at the closest to Earth. That's coincidental, by the way. But when Mars comes to opposition, and it's also at this particular time of its appearance, it's at its closest to the sun. This means that the atmosphere warms up, and it's a long way from the Earth. It's a lot colder than the Earth, but it causes atmospheric storms, and it causes a huge dust storm. This time, one of the largest dust storms we've ever seen on Mars. Why that is significant, apart from the fact we can't see the surface, because there's just all this dust in the atmosphere. The Opportunity rover, which is on Mars at the moment, has been there since January 2003. It was meant to last 3 months. It's still going strong, but they're worried about it because its solar panels aren't getting the sunlight it needs to charge its batteries, and they're very worried that they might lose contact with it. This storm is probably we think we have bad storms in the Isle of Man. This storm is actually going to rage probably till September or October time, till Mars moves a bit further away from the sun than it is at the moment. And when that dust storm dies down, they'll be frantically trying to get in touch with Opportunity once again. And fingers crossed they will maintain contact with it, but it's not a certainty by any means.
No, it's extraordinary. So even the planets are suffering from extreme conditions.
Oh yeah,
now.
this is. I mean, I don't want to get involved in the climate change debate, but things in the solar system can affect weather quite appreciably. Now, Mars comes to opposition every 2 years. It takes 2 years to go around the sun, so every 2 years it's at its closest to the sun it can get, and it just happens to coincide with being close to the Earth at the same time this time. So every 2 years they get these atmospheric storms, these dust storms on Mars, and this one is particularly a very strong, powerful one. And they are worried about, as I say, these rovers. It's a feature, it's a natural phenomenon. It is something that they're aware of. They knew it could happen, and they park the rover in such a place that it will get maximum sunlight once the sunlight returns to it. In the meantime, the other rover on Mars, Curiosity, doesn't have the same dependence on solar panels. It has a different power source as well as solar panels. So that one is trundling along and doing its work quite happily.
It's just extraordinary to think of these things on the planets and sending information back and
absolutely
and just it's
only in 50 years. You were talking about the Beatles back in 1968 when they released Hey Jude and all those sort of things. We hadn't landed on Mars then. We didn't land on Mars with a spacecraft till 1976. So it's all happened in the last 50 years. But the other great news for Mars only happened last week, and this happened while I was away, and this was the most exciting news. They've actually discovered an underground lake on Mars, liquid water underneath the surface of Mars. And where you've got water, it's very heavily a brine. It's very, very cold, but they've just detected this through the work of the European spacecraft, the Mars Reconnaissance Observer. It's Mars Express. It's a different one. They've discovered this lake, and where you've got water capable of being as water, liquid water, not ice, that opens up all sorts of possibilities for could life have evolved on Mars.
So how far below the surface is this, Howard?
It's not that deep. It's about 50 miles or so, I'm guessing. It's not that deep at all. I haven't read the full details because I've only just got back and I need to get some scientific papers and analyse them. Internet's rubbish on the boats, as I was saying in the break. So I need to look into it. But it is a major discovery and one that has great implications. And there's a spacecraft on its way to Mars at the moment. We'll get there in October. We'll no doubt be talking about that as we go through the various programs. And the InSight lander is actually going to take a drill into the surface of Mars, go down a little bit, and then send some seismic waves in and out around the planet to detect what features there are within the structure of Mars. And that's something they haven't done before. So again, there's so many possibilities and so much going on, and we can see it in the Manx skies tonight. Well, not tonight, it's cloudy tonight, but if you look just south any night after about 9:30, 10 o'clock, look for a very, very distinctive red object in the sky. That's Mars. It is very red, very distinctive. And there's a dust storm going on. You've got rovers roving the surface. You've got spacecraft on the way there. And who knows, in the next 10, 15 years, maybe we're sending a manned mission there. Just wait and see.
Well, Yes, it's one of those thoughts. It just kind of leaves you speechless just for a moment. At where might this all go? Where might it
Well,
take
this
us?
is it. There's so much going on, and keeping pace with it is a problem.
Howard, in just a moment, I want to ask you, obviously, about our sky now and in the weeks to come. But you just mentioned about being on a ship and on a very sophisticated cruise liner, but the internet access being very, very poor.
It is.
And it just shows there's not everything that we control. Because
No.
when the ship is at sea, you were saying something about the signal has to go how many miles up?
Has to go up to geostationary orbit. One of the biggest growth industries in the satellite industry at the moment is maritime communications. Because when a ship is at sea, now, okay, we're in the Mediterranean, so it wasn't a huge problem. But when you're crossing the Atlantic or the Pacific or the Indian Ocean or some big oceans, the only way to get a signal to a ship is by using a geostationary satellite. You can't use a radio mast on land to give you your signals. So you've got to go all the way up to the satellite, 22,000 miles up, and then 22,000 miles back down again. What they do, they bounce it off the satellite and back up again, but then they'll use land links to get it, rather than go up and down 3 or 4 times, or 3 times to be precise, was what we call the Clark orbit. That's another story. But it is a problem. And you get passengers on the ship most frustrated that they can't keep pace and do FaceTime to their grandchildren or whatever. But it's a physical fact. You're on a ship floating on an ocean and there's no land around. You can't get land transmitters.
But the idea of little old emails going 22,000 miles up in the sky and
Absolutely.
coming back down again is a bit daunting, isn't it?
It is a bit, especially when the email I sent to you about tonight's show just hasn't reached you yet.
Well,
I made it, just about, but the email will probably reach you on Tuesday, I'm reckoning, Judith.
if I had a choice, Howard, I'd rather have you in the studio
Thank you.
and no email.
Rather than an
That'll
email version.
Rather than an email, and that wouldn't have helped us at all.
No.
Okay, right, let's go stargazing close to home now.
Right. Well, we have in the sky at the moment what can best be described as a plethora of planets. When we do astronomy, people say the sky doesn't change much, but at the moment we've got a total of 5 planets visible. You can actually see, when you stand outside, you can see 5 planets in the sky. We've just gone into the observing period now where Mars is rising in the east and Venus is setting in the west. And you can see them both at the same time. If you look from one horizon to the next, you can see Venus very low in the west and Mars rising in the east. Both very bright. Venus, obviously, after the sunset, Mars rising in the east, very, very red indeed. But in between them, we've got another very bright object, which is the planet Jupiter, quite unmistakable. It's the only bright object in this part of the sky. It's quite a faint area of the sky this time of the year, the summer stars. And this Jupiter is quite unmistakable. Roughly a third of the way from one horizon to the next, you've got Jupiter. And then between Jupiter and Mars, we've got another brightish star, a lot fainter than Jupiter, but that's Saturn. And we can actually look at Venus, Jupiter, Saturn and Mars in one glance across the sky. So that's 4 planets. And there's, of course, a 5th one you can see at the same time as well. That's the one you're standing on.
You always catch me out on that one.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking I'll get ahead of the curve here, and I'm always caught out. No. But that is pretty special.
And it is pretty special because you don't get that very often. In this time next year, I think we're just going to have Jupiter in the sky. We might still have Saturn, I'm not sure. But Venus swaps round between the sunset and the sunrise sky, the morning sky or the evening sky. Mars comes round every 2 years, as I've already mentioned. So we're going to be left with just Jupiter and Saturn next year. And Saturn is very, very low. We were very fortunate on the ship to see it a lot higher up from the Mediterranean countries. But on the Isle of Man, it is very low on the horizon and not particularly easy to spot. But it's there. And if you've got a small telescope or a decent pair of binoculars, just look at these planets I've explained. Remember, Venus low in the west, nothing much to look at telescopically, except it was slowly becoming a crescent rather than a disk. Jupiter with its 4 little moons, the Galilean moons, first discovered by Galileo in 1610, made him realise the Earth was not a planet that ever went round, but it was in fact a planet going round the sun. Huge, massive discovery back in 1610, which launched telescopic astronomy on the globe. And of course, it's grown from that to spaceflight and everything else. But Saturn, you need a small telescope for this one. You can see even low on our horizon. It's not very easy to spot, but if you can get that through a telescope, you'll see these rings around it. You'll see this lovely little disk with this set of rings around it, and it really is quite special. Mars, on the other hand, as I say, just a disk at the moment, a blurry disk because it's just got no surface features because of this huge dust storm. Yeah. But that in itself, you're looking at a storm on another planet. Yeah. And that's just something we've got in the sky at the moment, which is quite spectacular for us.
And I was just thinking the other night, I was out walking and it was quite dusk, and I was just thinking, even if you didn't know anything at all about the sky, just the moon is so beautiful. Just look. When you can only see the moon, there is something very, very special about it.
Especially from an island when you see it shining on the sea as well. It's funny you should say that, because I've done a lot of stargazing with people on the ship just recently. And I tell people repeatedly, I can talk to you about the technical details of what we're looking at, dust storms or Galileo or whatever, but just enjoy it. Just go outside, look at the moon, look at the stars, look at the shapes. Imagine these wonderful stories they made up. They didn't have books and magazines and televisions and internet. They sat out there and they made up these weird and wonderful stories. And next month we're going to talk about one of them. So I'll just lead you into that one.
Do you're saying this, and I have to tell you what happened to me last night. Because, you see, I'd already got my Manx Sky at Night hat on again, I think last night, you see. And I went out quite late at night to put some rubbish in the bin. And I'm very lucky in that where I live, there is very little light pollution because the road goes quite quiet at night. There's no street lighting. So I'm very lucky. So I went out to the bin and I could see this orange glow ahead of me. And my first thought was that it was a reflection from a light in the house that I had on. Mm-hmm. But I looked and it wasn't in the right place at all. So the one light that I had on, I went in the house, switched it off, and still there's this glow. And I'm thinking, this is something special. I'm going to be able to tell Howard I've seen something really special in the air, And then I went a bit closer and investigated. And some naughty person had taken, one of those warning lights that they put at the roadside when there's roadwork, when you're approaching roadworks. Somebody had taken one and thrown it in the hedge, and it was glowing away there. But I have to say that for a few moments I thought I was going to tell you about a new planetary discovery in Lazaire. But it's no, it wasn't to be this time. But it is all about being aware and most of all enjoying. That's what this whole program is about. Yeah. This whole program is about.
That's what I want. I want to pass on my fascination for it. The different things we can see each month. But I have got another treat for you. I have another treat for you before we finish tonight. Because as well as the 4 planets, or the 5 planets if we count the Earth, you have actually got, incidentally, Mercury visible at the end of August. Very difficult to spot. Below Venus in the evening sky, over Peel, you might spot a very faint but distinct star, which isn't there normally. That's Mercury. So you can actually see all the naked eye planets in one sitting almost, but that's very much at the end of August, and that is not easy to see. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the August show, because that's actually going to be visible between the 21st and 31st of August, and we're doing our next one on the 25th of August, so great opportunity for me to mention that one. But between now and then, we have I would say the second best meteor shower of the year. The Perseid meteor shower peaks every year on and around the 12th of August. And the Perseid meteor shower occurs in the summer months, and this year, just like in 2016, there's no moonlight. We've just had a full moon, so the moon is actually new on the 11th of August. So the next night, perfect night for looking for the Perseid meteors. Look for Mars again, look in the low in the eastern sky, and just look in that general direction, preferably somewhere where it's nice and dark. And I will almost guarantee, if it's a clear night, and if you stay outside for about half an hour, you'll see some shooting stars, some meteors in the sky coming from the constellation of Perseus, where they come from every single year. It's a great opportunity. And 2 years ago, we had a similar situation with little moonlight. It was one of the best meteor showers I've ever seen, because the Perseids really is one of the best. Them and the other one is the Geminids in December, but it's not quite as warm in December. So you've got a great opportunity. Go outside, lie in a blanket, lie in a sunbed, look towards the eastern sky, but don't look at one particular object. Just look, because meteors always seem to come out the corner of your eyes. Really? And we have a rule. If you see a meteor, it doesn't count unless someone else sees it.
Really?
You've got to have 2 people. It's only, I made this one up. But obviously, anyone can say, I saw one. But no, you need to have somebody with you. And 2 people have to verify it. But we are looking forward to, hopefully, a great Perseid meteor shower this year. And with 4 planets, with the meteors, with Mars, all the news about Mars. And there's going to be a very important announcement from NASA on Friday about they're going to announce the crew of the first manned spaceship to leave American soil to go up to the ISS. It's probably not going to launch for another 18 months, 2 years possibly, but they're actually going to name the crew. And I will put money on it. You can listen to the news on Friday. One of those chaps will be Eric Bowe, who was here in the Isle of Man in 2012 for Tynwald Day. He came as a guest with Nicole Stott.
Well, you read my mind there, because my final question was going to be, is there anything happening in the space world that we need to know about? So the man to watch out for, the prediction is that Eric
Bowe will be named
there
as one of the astronauts he'll be one of the commanders of either the Dragon or the Boeing Starliner.
We'll listen out for that.
And hopefully we'll get that literally on Friday.
Howard Parkin, thank you very much indeed for joining us
pleasure.
for this month's edition of the Manx Sky at Night. We'll talk to you again on the final Sunday of August.
I look forward to it.